Hello, this is Lenny Triglia. I never tried to contact him in life, never saw him on campus in my life. Increasingly, people tied to Lenny Triglia and his neighbors, including a former mayor, Gold, have roles with people involved with the World Trade Center attack in spots next to Hartford Hospital, and people at Hartford Hospital involved with foreign domestic intelligence, involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and women roles, women judges too, and people involved with houses near them. I don't know their names. I don't even know they're not them. I don't. They try to pretend other, putting fake ties. People involved with spying on me with them, and lying to my family about me with other people involved with them in my area, involved with the confessions of the police. And I don't know if they're tied to the Asabi Scalora, a whole bunch of people with all these countries in the news involved with this Joshua Stryker too, involved with identity theft frauds against me when I was a kid and then as an adult. As people enter campuses, enter cities, and next to them planting evidences with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members. In other words, what are they doing all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices? Increasingly with people involved with the ongoing. The police put me in fake conversations with them that weren't at all fake ties to me as a kid at the police station, faked, and now as an adult too. And with these Mendez police that were involved directly and indirectly with wire crime acts and methods, identity theft, and fraud when I was a kid, too, with these names. And now as an adult with the older Mendez police brother, involved also with the World Trade Center attack. These names from Connecticut involved with the World Trade Center attack spot and next to them. And these names rolls also with the names next to Fox Connecticut News and next to WFSB and next to WTNH, but also collusions with those names and with their sources at corners of streets too, and all along roads and routes and conjunctions to them and to that. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence, and the people that, in other words, involved with you with my name, Lance Cuddy, too. That's another name. I never saw him on campus either. He's one involved too with one of the names that brought up. In other words, let's get please. Keep forgetting his name, so I had to write it in the video here. These are people next to Hartford Hospital through time, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts with educators, with foreign and domestic military, a bunch of people with Central Connecticut State University and the Britain, Connecticut have collusions all along Route 3 junctions to it and to that, like Hangdog Lane, which I believe is associated with the I don't know what he's involved with either. What's his name? I keep forgetting his name. It's the title of this thing. So I just want to, in other words, please get them on. Please, the Wethersfield police have been forging and switching names with this name involved, and other police departments involved. A bunch of people with the name O'Brien too, and Kalal. Further, Phil Kalal was involved with more predicate acts on my street and more child abusers and people with the elderly homes and roles of veterans and the difference of the organized crimes there or next to it. These are people involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, planting evidences into databases, roles of predicate acts methods with all sides of criminal and civil cases. A bunch of people at Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Court affected confessions in West Hartford, Connecticut, with a bunch of on off the state judicial branch office of Connecticut and Wethersfield and Hartford and the corrections offices involved with the World Trade Center attack through Connecticut. But, and other states with the same ones involved. Wire crimes of the Wethersfield police, switching names, forging names, refusing to get on paper since I was a kid. They put all kinds of predicate acts methods. And this is also relative to how they have our founders' communications replaced. I've been trying to communicate this each year intercities, the same ones, off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices in Connecticut, inclusions with people with interstates, international, off the campuses, intercities, interstates. In other words, please get them on paper. Get who disbelieves. I want a response to the principal child abuser's confessions and what I caught them doing to more kids, including attaching me to fake conversations with kids. In other words, trying to put fake ties to me by filming fake exceptions, using them, in other words, with the people I caught forcing child abusers, sexual and medical, with the New Britain Superior Court women too. A bunch of women with New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts have roles with foreign and domestic military, and people all along involved, intercities, with the town lines too. Get them on paper with the Wethersfield Police first, though, and then the New Britain Superior Court and the Harper or the Harper courts. There's also they're switching reports. They have Officer Hunter. I don't know if it's his actual name either, because they're playing games with people with that were involved with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin in courts and their family members in intimate ties before the World Trade Center attack, involved with predicate acts and federal evidences crimes at West Hartford locations, and they also forced Saudis to collusions with them. I don't know. It's intermilitary too. It's a bunch of people like all along Route 175 through time who have been planting evidences with intelligence families next to my area. And so then when they go back and they pretend things, they want to have subjects of pretending, building on what's fake in the databases, and that can be observed. But you guys aren't allowing them to get on paper because they're trying to build on that. They have all kinds of scams against integrity as the only people allowed to speak for such in the law. Criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw predicate acts methods, whole wire crime acts and methods, and roles with use /s of the databases, all sides of criminal and civil cases, the names of the court and the news at the same time, names tied to body dumping spots, private and criminal work criminal enterprises, and terrorists, even when they're not even in the cases. They're the ones who have them using logic, wasting our time every day speaking and using words like radical and extremism for their points or isms. They hit them down. I'll gather round. Fix the fake conversations that WFSB Channel 3 News pretended with me. Increasingly, it's also recorded, not just confessed by people. There are people tied to Gail King that Channel 3 News is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming also with the spots in intelligence next to Central Connecticut State University. Also involved with the difference of the guilt there or the guilt at Central Connecticut State University. Also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the family of a Dean Judd. Involved also with other leaders of kids and their kids. Abused, but also forced to abuse others that don't even live with planting fake things in databases, self-value roles, and collusions with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, their sources, their lawyers, their family members, the conjunctions to them, the same thing with the courts, all that at the same time. News, the body double spy, it's not complicated, it's just extensive, and everyone uses this and has used the rights to lie and hide the criminality, the organized crime methods, self-value, the collusion /s self-value, all natures of the names of the people of the sciences, including all the identities of law, originally and still black peoples. This would not have been left out. How we have black people's rights of eyes, how a breaching method reassigned, but nature communicates with that. That alone, little kids could have communicated that, but we are sensitive. We try to do that. That's why we have to have it known what our founders do. Thank God I read about it for us. Our founders, plural, directed us to understand themselves as James Madison, singular. And they had means to counter-extort, even George Washington. And George Washington alone didn't have means to counter the internationally monitored conversations and torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery method of the countries that also had us that, the rest of humanity. Sickly distinctly, too, all of our differences, they use it against it, like Native Americans. Native Americans are coupled with the colonists behind it as James Madison's plan. But you guys won't even allow the extortion of George Washington to be honest. You won't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, how he was tortured too. And everyone was fact-cheating nature enslaved. Also proofs of it is anyone who tries to debate that has inherent too active, too progressive, too. Their logic, their natures of logic, demonstration /s of the same thing. All appearances of other come with demonstration /s of the same thing. And where, how, and why. Our founders communicated for us to understand our founders, distinct from our presidents, except for James Madison, who still, they had it declassified for us. They didn't have free speech. No one did. No one could tell their actual motivations. No one could say, well, in other words, because the breaching method still had and still has internationally monitored conversations. They want and need, not just because of the reasons they themselves know, to have conversations, backgrounds, because only these people know about those things. That's why in other words, they have to keep cooling nuclear energy. And we're all having to hunger and thirst through jobs that are tactical terror from what nature needs to be appreciated with positive and negative treatments for our short ones, let alone their protraction. They have all kinds of criminally foreign influence. The differences of the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, or the terrorists. In other words. And two, the counters to all types of things, like victims advocates have some of the worst collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Even if, whether they call that legitimate with their roles with the military with that. Increasingly, people tied to a Joe DeMauro, Ray Colo, involved with the military with identity theft, fraud, slanders, acting so other people can record fake things and make it look like people communicated that didn't. Like with a Dave, increasingly with the FBI and courts before and after the World Trade Center attack, involved with messing with the sense and sensibilities of people directly and indirectly involved with boxing gyms in Connecticut, and as people involved interstates, and increasingly with the World Trade Center predicate acts too, as ones involved with the World Trade Center, and names intercities that were connected and are connected in ways they don't even realize, as names next to campuses involved with relative identity theft, fraud, slanders instances. They'll tell you themselves they don't know me, they're just repeating fake things, or they didn't know that was faked in campuses in databases for them. Increasingly, in other words, fire departments are involved at Harvard Hospital with people from Russia and Ukraine and Korea and Italy and, in other words, etc. Involved with Weathersfield Police and wire crime action methods, and with names indirectly and directly involved with them stacking fake transcripts and ties to me in their databases when I was a kid, now as an adult. People I never even saw around campuses at all or anywhere else. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence about anything. Who disagrees? Tell me who disbelieves anything I say. All this time, I've been asking you guys to help with World Trade Center predicate acts, child abuse acts. They have wire crime acts and methods. A bunch of people involved with the name Barnett, too. I don't know if they're related to the Sandy Hook victim. God forbid. I'm so sorry for you guys. But there's people with the name Barnett and with the intelligence families, with the campuses with Sandy Hook, Newtown, Connecticut, that are also intercities involved. Also with people tied to Adam Lanza's doctors, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and delusions relative. But there's a Barnett involved with the World Trade Center attack and people with the FBI and the CIA from Connecticut. And like people with the name Scalora are involved in intercities, Weathersfield Police, with Marines involved too. A bunch of people with the Marines, the Air Force. They have Judge Napolitano's sense and sensibilities and subject treatments. In other words, and sources like this Aaron Mate looks a lot like a Joe DeMauro, who's one of the ones involved with a Mr. Abruzzi, also with my fifth grade teacher, also brought up by confessions by adults and kids, involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, since I was a little kid, with intelligence tied to them, planting federal evidences crimes every year of my life around me, with people around me. And I was ones with other campuses doing the same thing. And then I learned more and more about this. You also guys are leaking with confessions and silence. Get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News, WFSB. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. There are more things they're hiding. In other words, that I need to speak about, and they already put me in fake conversations with the things I spoke with you about. They put me in fake conversations with people, with me, with the people around me since I was a kid. They're doing this to other kids. They're doing this to anyone who wants to use black people as whites of eyes and pay attention to that breaching method against Native Americans, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly against the colonists too, and against the. We could discern that even before we learn what we're going to learn about what James Madison actually communicated, because they have that replaced. Our pace. Our founders communicated that and how and why they did not have free speech. Everyone was being sensed through them, through everyone else, and through themselves. In other words, the laws were that crazy, and the differences of that being the ones most criminally involved, and is differentially, but increasingly equal with that overt criminal enterprises, private ones, because that difference is used to hide behind and through by the breaching method that knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate to humanity. For example, there's a breaching method that is non-distinctly hurting countries A through Z and people A through Z. And it's nature showing us it's a breaching method they did bad things to countries A through Z people at locations, areas, and states to make them counter it, and then to defend that wrongly, and then to have the counters to that defend that wrongly, and then more and more screen itself, but also more and more defending science is abridged, tactically abridged, and then simultaneously hyper abridged, because it also showed that means how in other words, it also needs to hide that also being demonstrated to us. So it showed everyone. It showed them after a while to get how they have to get other things, others themselves blame for their roles with itself. That which, for example, had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And you guys still have self-valued roles, otherwise sensing for the breaching method. If you don't keep it looking like our founders had roles with that to other countries and to our own people, right through our own campuses, then they have to pretend not to do it. So they have to pretend to be about racial equality and leaving out and using the sense of like they don't pretending they don't realize. That's the whole scam. It's supposed to be, in other words, showing how the breaching method is sickly, distinctly hurting every person, even when they help them with its roles with black pupils, whites of eyes, revelations replaced, and our founders simultaneously. That's what the value of what you read about our America's founders is, because they try to make them our presidents. They try to make them the ones that weren't even our presidents, like Benjamin Franklin. In other words, you want to follow principles. Follow Marbury versus Madison. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. And we need to get the Constitution unabridged and appreciated hyper additionally where, how, and why. We have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, let alone to people that can't afford to have discerned what witch trials are about and why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And still other communicated for that place that our fathers communicated for it. And we have to ask what was simultaneous with those things. One of the things that was simultaneous with those things was slavery, entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, before America's founders were born. And roles with that only allowed, and otherwise only two. Anyone against that was against the law to even have people, to sense people against it and not say anything. In other words, they have it such like that now too. Like even with the forced use of the word Holocaust, even though all sides had collusions with private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises, and forcing blame on others themselves. Rolls with the breaching method that had torture, extortion, and slavery of everyone entertained, and rolls with it. In other words, through world wars, all sides had collusions. We have to pay attention how the breaching method uses differences. And we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. We could discern how differences are being and haven't been used, tactical terror from nature, how it communicates for us to use difference, and how it uses relativity. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. They're the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. And there are exceptions. And in other words, therefore, there is relativity. There were also other species that we did not invent, and they also have two eyes, and they have quality aspects in nature, distinct but also non-distinct and simultaneous. But also per that further, not us nor them, but as all things anyway. So per that further, hyper simultaneous as further relativity / hyper relativity. It's not a theory. They put a theory with reason and make it about math. What does math have to do? Math is about measuring. It's not about correlation / hypercorrelation. The science of language / S is simultaneously greater than and more finite than the other sciences. I mean, okay, thank you, people. Vaccines, I teach us things, but Lord, come on. Yeah. Papayaros sees.